Welcome to the Telling of Story podcast. I'm your host, storyteller Jules, and along with my guests, it's my endeavour to explore the art and science of storytelling to attract, engage, and retain a business audience, and to unpack why it works for some and not for the many that try. Listen in as Andy talks about dominating your category.
So our little store, we spent the most on advertising out of every business in the town. And part of that was about trying to tell a story. And one of the things we did was we said, righto, what's a category that we can own? What's a category that we can dominate? And we started with sunglasses. And so we made a concerted effort that we were going to be the best sunglass shop, if not in the state, at least outside of Adelaide. And so that's what we moved on to do.
In this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Andy Ireland. Andy started the 4-Wheel Drive Tribe podcast in March 2021 after retiring and looking for something to do that aligned with his interest and skill set. Prior to that, Andy started and operated with his wife Elena and many wonderful staff an award-winning surf shop in Port Augusta, country South Australia for 25 years. Was chosen as Australian Day Citizen of the Year for the city in 1999. Prior to moving back to Port Augusta, Andy had lived in Coffs Harbour, owning and operating the Coffs Harbour Dive Centre, a scuba diving charter and instruction business, living in Broome, managing a hire car company, starting a fencing business with no prior experience, and selling mobile phones throughout the town well before there was even a tower in Broome to use them with. Andy has sailed a catamaran from Airlie Beach in Queensland to Port Augusta in South Australia, but today is known as that 4-Wheel Drive podcast guy. Andy, welcome to the show.
Hey, g'day, Jules. How you going?
Good, thank you, mate. Thank you so much for joining me. Mate, something you shared with me, I just want to sort of extend a little bit on your bio because you shared a whole bunch of other things, and I just think it's interesting because clearly you've had a wide and wonderful experienced life. So I just want to rattle off a few more things because there's one thing in particular I want to sort of come back to inside of that. So you've also had a business coaching venture. You've renovated 6 houses and built 4 new ones, lived in 4 states, was the youngest commission-only life insurance salesman, won sales performance trips to the USA, Hong Kong, Tahiti, left home at 17, you hitchhiked to 1975 Sunbury Rock Festival, sold $1 million life insurance policy back in the early 80s, dived with the crew from the Jacques Cousteau research vessel, dived with sharks and whales. You've taught plenty of people to scuba dive and snorkel, and started the first whale watching business on the East Coast, as well as starting the first snorkeling course in New South Wales. So, wow, what a wide and varied, interesting history you've got there, Andy.
I sent you that stuff because you didn't know much about me. So as a bit of a base of going, I can probably talk about storytelling along the track of your podcast. But anyway, I didn't think you would read that out. But anyway, yeah, I've had it's interesting when I sit back and my wife always says, you're going to have to do your eulogy because no one else is going to know what you've done this is part of the thing about living. Like we moved around, I guess, a bit. So we created circles of friends in different places. And so all of those friends know part of the story. So they know the story of that, our relationship in that particular place. But very few people, in fact, I don't know anyone really knows the whole story.
Right.
And so it's probably only me. So unless if I don't do my eulogy, it's probably not going to get done with justice. So that's sort of how it works.
Yeah. You might have to do an entire podcast or something just on your life story. But I want to come to one of those or a couple of those things. I'm not sure if they're exactly related, but you left home at 17 and then hitchhiked to the 1975 Sunbury Rock Festival. Are they interrelated or separate times?
Yeah, no, it is because we, a good mate of mine, Peter Coates, and I, we were pretty free-spirited young lads, and we'd sort of had enough of Port Augusta back when we were. I think he'd just turned 18 early December, and I was still 17, and we were actually going to hitchhike up to Darwin. and that was 1974. So we were going up to stay with a mate who lived in Darwin in December 1974. So if you think back to what happened in 1974, it was Cyclone Tracy.
Mm.
So we would have rolled into Darwin about Christmas week in our two-man tent and pitched that, or gone to stay with our mate, and we'd have walked straight into Cyclone Tracy. So it
Wow.
was only that my mum said, she said, listen, why don't you at least wait till you're 18 or near 18? And it was probably good advice, and it talked us out of going at that particular time. So we missed out on Cyclone Tracy, and but it was Sunbury Pop Festival in the new year of 1975. So that was our, I think that was our benchmark. We said, right, we're going. So we
Right.
hitched a ride.
I'm guessing that might have been the beginning of your worldwide adventures, I guess, or your adventures outside of home. Is that the beginning of your free spiritedness?
Yeah, look, I guess it was. Yeah, I mean, even later in life, Lena's father always called us the gypsies. Um, but yeah, we sort of, I don't know, I just like to move around and explore new things and experience new things. Yeah.
We did you happen to be there for the inter well the punch up basically between Deep Purple and ACDC? Were you there
Well,
as part
well,
of that?
well, I was there, yeah, but that all went on in the background.
Right.
It was funny that, excuse me, that event we allowed 5 days to hitchhike there, and we stuck our thumb out in Port Augusta, and we were there the next day.
Wow.
So it sort of stuffed our plan up. So we set up camp out the front of the festival. The gate, it was just on a bloke's property, so the gates were just there shut. No one else was there, and we just set up our two-man tent. And a few days in, the security all came and set up all of their stuff. So our first few nights were just sitting around the campfire with those guys, waiting for it to open. And mate, you could do a whole podcast just on Sunbury, because then one of the hire companies came through and they were looking, and they asked us if we wanted to have a job. So we ended up spending a heap of time before Sunbury actually building all the marquees, working on the stage, and doing all of that stuff. We ended up staying in all the caravans that all the bands would end up using as their vans as they went through the concert and so on. And we ended up staying another week after to pull it all down again. So yeah, there's a story, the whole story just in that.
Yeah. And
That.
was that just coincidence that they just saw you and needed some help, or did you actually go in and look for some help?
No, no, look, we were just there, just happened to be. We ended up talking to these guys, just talking, telling stories.
Yeah.
And they said, why don't you come work? We could do with a hand. So we did. And I think even in the day, one of the Melbourne papers came out and did a story on us as the first arrivals to Sunbury.
Right.
So somewhere in the archives around that time, there's me and Peter, and yeah, we've got an article about us in the one of the Melbourne papers. Yeah.
So was there any plan post that? Like you left, you went there. Were you going back to port, or were you heading somewhere else?
Mate, we just headed off into the Riverland after that, and spent months moving from town to town, doing a bit of fruit picking, a bit of this, a bit of that, and yeah, just enjoying ourselves as young blokes do. So we did that for a number of months until we thought, you know what, we're really not achieving too much here, and then we hitchhiked back to Port Augusta again and started on some other adventures back there.
Right. Where did that lead? What did you come home to?
Oh, mate, it was interesting, and look, and I suppose this is part of the when you talked about asking me the podcast with the storytelling, and I sort of thought, oh yeah, I do like to tell a tale or two, and I look back and it probably it started way back in my early childhood, but now I look back, there were sort of all of these indicators in whatever I did. And one of the things, we went back to Port Augusta, I went and worked out on the railway line, and I worked as a fettler. So this is back in the railway line when they were still using timber sleepers,
Mm.
and a lot of it was manual. Like you carried the timber sleepers around by hand, which I look back at OH&S now, I'm going, how did we ever get away with this stuff? No shirts, no safety shoes, no nothing, no protective earwear or anything. The rooms were not air conditioned. You didn't have access to a fridge. So this is in one of the single men gangs. And we built basically railway lines, and it was very, very physical work. But I look back, and it was a great time of life because the characters that were out there were, and from all walks of life. You know, I had guys that had lost. This is still early enough. This is what, in the 70s. So, you know, there were guys from. I remember one of the little guys, Ernie Rosa, from Europe, and he'd lost all of his family in World War Two. There was a heap of Aboriginal guys on there. They were a heap of fun. There was guys from all over Australia, and they were pretty much. I don't know what you'd call it, but we were all. I'm not sure we were wanted in town. It was a real, like the police would turn up. This is the sort of level of it, and the police would turn up, and they drive down this oh, it was a dirt track, so it was a four-wheel drive track, and they'd turn up in the paddy van, and we were miles and miles from civilization. Like, again, we're out of Barton. If you have a look at that on the map, it's well west of Tarcoola and amongst the Barton Sandhills. And you'd just be looking around the gang, and next thing, two blokes, they'd get put in the paddy van and taken back to town because they were looking for warrants and stuff. And some of the guys were on warrants, but because the coppers knew where they were, they didn't care, so long as they were out of town.
Right.
So sort of like the Wild West. The amount of guns in the camp was just like, you know, I think to today, there were pistols, there were shotguns, there were 22s. I had a guy turn up in the camp, and I sort of befriended him. And after talking to him a few times, I thought, oh, something different with this guy. Anyway, and then he showed me his certificate that he was basically certified insane and not fit for work.
Right.
But he scammed this job out on the thing. And the ironic part of it was I used to borrow his 22 to go shooting. So he had the gun. It was just stuff like that, mate. It was yeah, like the Wild West, really. And then when that sort of ran out, I ended up working in three different gangs on that. They were very formative, if you like. Yeah. And you're out, you know, when you think I was a young 17-year-old, a lot of these were big, grown, tough men, you know, and a lot of it was learning to fend for yourself. So it was a really good education, a really good grounding in I guess, growing up, if you like, or becoming a man. And from that point, you know, when we went back to Port Augusta, it wasn't long before I think the storytelling gene in me started to come out. And I think it was one day, my mate Peter and I, we'd rented a caravan, and we were living in that in the back of my parents' yard. And I woke up one day and I just said to Pete, I said, mate, I said, there's got to be more to life than this. And I said, I just feel like there's got to be more to life than this. Anyway, and that was it. I just moved to Adelaide, then down to be with a nephew who was very successful in life insurance industry. And I went down, I guess, to be his protege, if you like, or whatever. And that started, I guess, my storytelling for business, which basically was in the insurance industry.
So tell me a little bit about that, because the insurance industry back in the day didn't have the greatest reputation, and you know there was a lot of sort of cold selling. Tell me how you got into it, how it felt. Was it natural for you? Did you struggle with it? What was the sort of starting point, and how did you get around some of those challenges?
I guess initially my friend was almost an agency manager, so he had teams and stuff working for him. So I came in, and it was a bit of a battle because he was with AMP at the start, and it was a bit of a battle. They had two sides to the business. One was the collection agency, and it was literally where people took out insurance policies, and then people from the collection agency would go and knock on their door every month and collect the money.
Oh, wow.
So or there was the direct selling for commission. And I was 19 at the time, I think, and there was a bit of fighting from Gary tooth and nail, but I ended up getting accepted. But at the time, I was the youngest commission salesman accepted into AMP, and so that sort of started it. And worked for a few different companies, but the concept was always the same. And yeah, it was about storytelling, and it was, I guess, cold calling back in the day. And, you know, it was totally acceptable. People expected it. And in fact, that's how a lot of business got done. And it was usually a process of storytelling, if you like, because usually you would make contact by a telephone. And back in the day, information was quite accessible because there were things called electoral rolls. So you could just go along and buy an electoral roll to a suburb, and it had everybody's basic details there and what they did for a living. And then it wasn't really that hard to correlate that with out of the phone book, which we had a paper phone book, so out of this person is at this address. So you would look for that in the phone book, correlate it, and create I guess, an initial client card. And then you would have a night, let's say a Monday night of phone calling, where you'd be trying to set up face to face appointments. So it was a whole I guess it was a whole process. One story led to the next story to the next story. So you would ring your people and you'd have a chat to them on the phone, and some people would hang up in your ear, of course, and some people would have a big chat. Some people weren't really prospects, and sometimes it was sad. I remember ringing one family, and this was a young apprentice, and I remember mum answering the call, and I said, is Philip there? Oh no, who's this? I said, oh, it's so and so from here. She said, oh no, unfortunately, Philip died. He was killed at Rowley Park Speedway, and things like that. So you'd come across interesting situations as well. But then you would get so many appointments out of that. So you would set up face to face where you'd go into people's homes and sit down and talk. And it was basically, you I don't know, like it was called selling, but it really was just storytelling. You were just trying to frame the concept of insurance and the concept of the protection and the savings and the whatever into a format that would relate to that person. And if you related well enough, they would see the value in it and they would say, yes, I'll buy it. So, it wasn't really, you weren't really twisting arms or anything.
Was
And when
that
you think basically, back in the day, insurance, and sure you got paid a commission, but you didn't really get the full commission until 2 years.
right?
So there was incentive there to maintain a client relationship, and to service that client. And, because it was within that 2 years, if there was any cancellation, well, that commission would be clawed back. So you would lose it. So it wasn't just as easy as going, I'm going to go out and tell as many lies or whatever as I can and try and get as many clients, because that would backfire. And I think the industry was designed around that.
Did you find that you had I guess, a script to follow to start these stories, or were you very fluid in your approach, depending on who you spoke to?
No, look, I think part of storytelling is for selling is having a script, but I guess being able to maneuver around that script. But yeah, no, very much in the early days. I remember my early training, and there was so much role playing. We would role play sales appointments, and God, I reckon I can still remember the way it would go, and it was under the letters FIRS. Oh, C. Anyway, and along those lines, there would be a story along every letter that related to insurance and how it could work or how it would work in the life cycle of someone. Yeah.
And did you find that people were pretty receptive to you? Was it a bit of a charismatic thing, do you think? Or was it more about the words and what you were saying? Or was it more about personality and just getting some empathy through these people? Where do you think that connection came from?
I think all of the above, Jules. I'm sure, you would rock into someone's house and you'd know straight away going, oh, I don't click here.
Yeah.
It was just,
So I often talk about that, how you make somebody feel is equally as important, if not more important, to the story itself. So the story is part of it, but you need to relate. You need to be able to empathize. You need to be able to bring people into the story so that they feel like they're part of it. Would you agree on that, or did you find it was a little
yeah,
different?
I think there's a very good saying, and it goes something like, people will rarely remember what you said or what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's exactly right. Is that if you're going to tell a story, it needs to be about about them, or how it works for them, not how it works for you.
So insurance is a pretty tough industry, and you clearly did well because you got some sales performance trips out of it, but you also did some selling in the phone space in a town where they didn't even have a phone cell tower. So tell me about that part, and how do you sell something? It's kind of like selling ice to Eskimos, right? Like it's not something they exactly needed at the time. What was the story
No,
behind that?
and look, that I think that was part of as I grew older, I guess I became more and more entrepreneurial. And because I became more confident, as you get older I guess you get confident. It's a bit like if you were a plumber or an electrician. Well, you do your four years apprenticeship, and then as you go on, you will tackle more and more difficult jobs, and you will become more and more confident in your ability to do the difficult jobs. Well, I guess when you live by your wits, it's a bit the same. Is that it takes time for you to become comfortable in going, well, I backed that plan and it worked. I backed this and it worked, so I'll have a go at this. And it was after we'd had the Coffs Harbour Dive Centre. We sold a house in Unley actually, back in mid '80s, yeah, mid '80s, and we went and we just sold up and said that's it. We went travelling before it was an Instagram thing to do. We sold up, went in a 4-wheel drive and a box trailer. All our possessions got put in there, and we just went travelling. And I loved scuba diving back in the day, and we ended up in Coffs Harbour. And anyway, just because I had some family there, we ended up sticking around there longer than somewhere else. And because of that, the dive shop became available for sale. And that sort of meant, well, if I'm going to do this, I have to go down another path. So we ended up buying the dive shop and doing, commercial motorboat tickets and scuba diving instructor tickets and all the rest of it. And it was after that. But during that period while we owned the dive shop, mobile phones came in. And I remember buying the first mobile phone that we had, and how it changed things. So when we'd moved to Broome on this travels after that experience of that, we had the dive shop, we'd been there, we sold it, we went travelling again, we ended up in Broome, and I saw this little cutout article in the local paper, and it was that Telstra will be building a mobile phone tower in Broome. And the date off was, well and truly into the future. And I thought, and I looked back to how it had impacted on the way business was done in Coffs Harbour. And I thought, well, shit, the same thing's going to happen here. So back in the day, it was just a matter I made some phone calls and got onto the right people at Telstra, because back then they handled the mobile phones and everything, and got an agency to sell mobile phones. So at that time, I was actually building fences, but like I said, the old entrepreneurial spirit, and I said, oh, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. So I got this agency to sell mobile phones. So I bought a heap of mobile phones in from Telstra, and basically went around and started telling a story. It was basic sales again, Jules, and talking to people, all the real estate agents, all the builders, all the people I came across in my fencing business. But then in the afternoons, after I'd knocked off, I'd get showered and dressed up and go and see all the other business people in the town and say, mate, mobile phones are coming. I've got the latest mobile phone here. You can be up and ready to go the day it turns on. And so I basically saturated almost the mobile phone sales in the town well before there was even a tower to sell it. And it was funny back in the days, because you actually got a rolling commission from people's phone calls back
Nice.
then.
Yeah, nice.
Percentage. It wasn't huge, but it was a little bit. But yeah, that was a bit of fun. When you to sort of think something might happen and then to actually, exercise it and see it come off. Yeah, that was quite satisfying.
Yeah, nice. And how big a gap was it? So from when you started selling to when the tower actually turned up, are we talking weeks, months, years? Like,
Oh no, probably 6 months.
right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It was, yeah.
so it's still a bit of a story to say, hey, buy this. You're not. It's going to sit as a brick that in a box until that day.
It's a good paperweight until then. So yeah, I guess I must have been good at telling a story then
Clearly.
because I was telling people to look into the future. Yeah.
And you made your way back to Port Augusta in South Australia somewhere after that point. Just
Yeah, yeah, Broome. Look, was a funny place. I look, that place was like the Wild West back then. If you wanted to have a go, you could make money at anything.
mm,
There were that many opportunities that came up in that town, and what had happened was the opportunities had grown for me. And we looked, we could really have made something in Broome, but Elena never really liked it that much.
right.
It's very hot and very isolated. Well, I don't think that changed today. It's just a bigger town, but it was like I'd say to people, there's just two summers really. One's hot and one's really hot. Um, and usually put the F word in there. But it's yeah, and isolated, like very isolated. Government employees got a couple of airplane flights a year out of it, so you could get a deal to fly into Broome or a return in and out. But as a local, there were never any cheap flights out of Broome.
Right.
So yeah, it was anyway. So we decided to leave. So we sat down and did a SWOT analysis,
Mm,
and we looked at Coffs Harbour where we had business experience, and we looked at Port Augusta where we'd grown up, basically. And in the meantime, when I sold the dive shop, my accountant, went to him and I said, right, I said, what business should I look for next? I said, what does good in amongst your clients? And he said, I've got a client that's got a little surf shop up in Woolgoolga, and they do pretty good out of that.
mm,
So that sort of sparked me. So on our travels from that point on, every town we went to, I would go in and see if there was anyone that was selling surf labels or a surf shop. Now, bear in mind, a lot of these places are in the outback. Like there was someone in Lightning Ridge,
yep.
selling surf stuff. So there were surf shops or surf gear sold all around. And it was actually Bev Kinney up in Broome who owned Kinney Pearls, and just happened to be that I built a couple of fences for Bev, and she had the thing. And I said, mate, do you mind if I come in, and lift the hood up on your business and have a look at some numbers and stuff like that? And I said, I'm not going to be competition because we're going to go back to South Australia. She said, yeah, no problem. So sort of sat down with her a bit and went over some numbers and some figures. And so she was basically the surf outlet in Broome,
Mm,
and no major surf in Broome, of course. And so I sort of figured I'd done my market research because I'd been around Australia looking at where surf shops were, and I'm going, they don't necessarily have to have surf. So I looked back at Port Augusta and went, well, there's no surf shop there, but there's a town of almost 14,000 people, or a city. So I said, well, if it works in all these other places, it sort of says it's got to work there, unless they've got two heads or something. I don't know, but you just had to look. It was a bit like insurance. You looked at the numbers game and said, every town I've been into, there seems to be a successful outlet selling some form of surf brands,
mm.
whether it was a menswear shop or a dedicated youth shop or something. So, like I said, we did our SWOT analysis, and it came back to Port Augusta because in Coffs Harbour, there was already two or three of everything. It was a pretty busy, hectic place, and it was basically operating pretty much 7 days a week then.
Mm.
Port Augusta was still a country town, and it was still the old Monday to Friday and Saturday morning.
Yep.
And we sort of figured, yeah, there's more of a lifestyle, there's more of a go. So, and there was no competition for this type of business. There was not a surf label sold in the town at that stage. And so we said, righto, and that won the SWOT analysis. So we moved back to Port Augusta and set up the Saltbush Surf.
What year was that?
94, I think.
94.
Yeah.
I've got something to show you, and this is going to be weird for podcast people. This is a pair of jeans
You're
that I
joking.
bought. I'm holding up a pair of blue jeans that I bought from
Uh,
Saltbush Surf in 1994. I must have been one of your early customers.
there you go.
It is still my favorite pair of jeans. It's a Quicksilver brand. Fortunately, I bought it a little bit baggy at the time, but they still fit me. I still wear them, And look how good a condition they are. They are still in
I know. I am looking,
absolutely
and I'm just going to tell you right now to the listeners
perfect.
that they are in good nick. And I say credit to you for being able to wear the same clothes as
Good
1994
good effort,
because
right?
I can't.
I'm proud of that fact that I can still wear clothes from that
Uh,
era, but they kind of went out of style for a while, and then they kind of came back. So they were sort of in storage for a
yeah.
little bit, but they were in such good conditions that I just didn't throw them out ever or didn't donate
Uh,
them. And then I bought them out a few years ago and went, wow, these are still a really nice pair of jeans. So I wear them frequently. I love them, and I'm
that's real.
bought it from your shop. So how's that for a very small world?
That's incredible. Yeah. Well, they used to make really good jeans back in the day. Didn't always
Solid.
stay that way, but they were back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
So you were there for a good 25 years, right? Is that right?
25 years pretty much, yeah, until we sold the business. And it was, and you know what? I'd have to say, all of these things that I tried through my life, it wasn't until we'd gotten entrenched in the business, and I was in my 40s, I'd have to say, that I finally worked out what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Right.
So I'd done a lot of things prior to that, but I loved retail. That was funny. It had taken me so long to get to it, but when we did it, yeah, I loved it.
Nice. And obviously quite successful. If you were in business for that long, you did well. I remember it being a very busy store back in the day, but I only saw it sort of at the beginning, I guess.
Look, I think part of that was due to the back. We were so strong on customer service. It was just it was the backbone. Like I say, we had some really good staff, but nearly all of those staff were young crew, and we trained them. And I think the shop always stood out for its customer service. It was something that we just try. Obviously you never pleased everyone, especially in 25 years. But geez, most of them we busted our butt to try and do. And I think that was the key. And we always tried to have a really well stocked shop because this is the other thing: you can't sell fresh air.
Mm.
If you're a physical store, you just and it's what bugs me about trying to buy on the internet. I want to like those jeans. I want to pick it up and feel it. I want to try it on. I
Mm.
don't want to be stuffed around sending stuff back. And I think that was the key for a small town. We always tried to have a really good stock level so that when people walked in, they're going, "Oh, this doesn't feel like a country store." It we had a good stock level and we had a really good level of service. And I think that's the nuts and bolts of it that was the nuts and bolts of the start of it. And then as that went on, I guess I basically did my apprenticeship in retailing. And it wasn't really until I saw an ad in one of the industry magazines for this group called ISRA, and they talked in Independent Surf Retailers Association, and they talked about um, bench KPIs and stuff. And I look, I loved that stuff, researching business, what worked in business, what didn't, and we would try all sorts of stuff. And but I couldn't find stuff related, especially specifically to the surf industry. So they met in Sydney. So I made the point of going right. I jumped in the plane. I went to a meeting in Sydney, and they met 3 times a year at that time. So it was a fair cost if you can think of it from a country,
Yeah.
Port Augusta. You had to get yourself to Adelaide, then get on a flight to Sydney, and then the meeting was one day, but it was never that because as I always had to spend 2 nights in Sydney, and sometimes a night either in Adelaide on the way there or back to time the flights. So it was quite a big thing, a big expense. But I learnt so much from it because I got to meet a real bunch of really smart retailers who were using KPIs and benchmarks and segmentation and categories in their store and the point of sale. They were using point of sale software really well, and I just learnt my knowledge went just in the J curve. It just skyrocketed. So I never missed a meeting from that point on for years until I left the shop.
Mm.
And in fact, I became president of that group.
Right.
So I ended up driving the direction of that. No, great team, great bunch of guys. I just loved every meeting that we went to, and and that really became where the surf awards came from, because the next step to that was, we, at the end of each meeting, we would always sit around and have a few beers and talk about what if and what could be possible. And one of our dreams was to have, because this group, one of the criteria was it was non competitive.
Mm.
So to be in that group, you had to be in a region where there was no other member.
Mm.
So by definition, it was always going to be fairly small. So we had about 20 odd members, and so everyone was non-competitive, so that you would share intimate details about your business, and without fear of it going back to your competitor or anything. And we always thought, what if we could have an overarching industry association? So it was over a few beers, and we would flesh this out. Anyway, one day I was sitting at work, and my mate was a real mover and shaker. He's got 19 shops now, and all through New South Wales and Tassie and stuff. And I said to him, I said, listen, I've got time. And one of our keys was to have some sort of surf industry awards. And I said, I've got time. Let's just organise some awards and get this thing kicked off. And it sort of stimulated, it took it from more than beers on a balcony to actually some physical steps. And I went to Port Macquarie and spent a week with him in his business, and we nutted out the framework for what became the Surf Retailers Association, and became an industry body, which became sponsored by all the brands like Billabong, Quicksilver, and we created a board, and we had retail members and physical and industry board members. And that thing grew and grew and grew, and it still goes today. But I was really happy to be a founding member of that association and hold various positions in that. And it came time, to step off. But what we did create was these awards. And what I loved about it a lot was that they weren't just, popularity awards. Sometimes, some business awards can be what's the most popular business at the time. These were based on KPIs. And so a little shop like mine could compete with the bigger businesses because we were competing on the same key performance indicators and proper business metrics. And so hence it was, I was pretty rapt that we worked really hard in our business. And not only did we try and run a good business for the customer, but we tried to run a really good business for us as well. And by that, it needed to be profitable. And to do that, well, we had to run it like a proper business. So we treated this little surf shop in country South Australia like a proper big business. We had our reporting and our monthly meetings and KPIs and all the rest of it. And we were fortunate enough that within these industry awards, that one year we won the best single, because it was a single, you're either a single store or you're a multiple store.
Yep.
And we won the best single store in South Australia, and that was a real highlight. And then in a couple of years, or a couple of years later, or a year later or something, we didn't take out the big one, but we became runner up, the second best single door store in Australia.
Nice.
So those sort of things, and they were really motivating. And look, end of the day, if you think back, that all became about storytelling, because we were the biggest radio advertiser in Port Augusta. So our little store, we spent the most on advertising out of every business in the town. And part of that was about trying to tell a story. And one of the things we did was we said, righto, what's a category that we can own? What's a category that we can dominate? And we started with sunglasses. And so we made a concerted effort that we were going to be the best sunglass shop, if not in the state, at least outside of Adelaide. And so that's what we moved on to do. And we became that. And essentially through our marketing and our storytelling on radio and advertising, we became the biggest range of sunglasses in the Spencer Gulf, the biggest range of sunglasses outside of Adelaide. And that became one of our core categories. And we owned that and dominated it almost within the state. So, that was, I guess that's one of the things about storytelling. And in fact, on that, our storytelling got us to be absolutely groundbreakers with Oakley. And Oakley used to be a really groundbreaking company back in the day. They were so cutting edge. It wasn't funny. And you could buy all the parts for an Oakley sunglass. And we happened to have a meeting set up with the national manager of Oakley, and it was down in Adelaide with our local rep, and it was at a Japanese restaurant. And we talked about it on the way down. I went down with one of the guys that worked with us, Jeremy, and I said to him, I said, we're going to meet this guy this afternoon. If we could have anything we wanted, what would we ask him for? And Jeremy came up with a great idea. He said, "Oh, wouldn't it be good to do custom sunglasses, to be able to build sunglasses in store?" Because Oakley had all the parts. And so wouldn't it be great to get a frame and then put a different lens in than what you can buy from factory? And so we went to that dinner that night, and that's what we sold. We sold that story. And we became the trial store in little old country Port Augusta to do the custom sunglass program. So we were the only place in Australia you could walk in and look at a huge range, all the frames, all the lenses, all the different coloured icons, and go, I want that one, and that one.
Nice.
And build it for me on the spot. And so at the end of the day, it wasn't until they let that program, it was a long time before they let that program into the bigger stores. So once again, we were proud to be innovators with that. But it was a sense of storytelling that we had to get this guy on board, that it was possible, and that we were the team that could do it. We were the ones in Australia that could do it. And I guess we did. We told a good story that night because that's what happened.
As far as marketing over that 25-year period, did you shift the marketing effort in any way? Did it always remain radio, or, towards the end, I'm assuming social media started to become a thing towards the end of your time there? Did you leverage any other marketing medium?
Yeah, look, it did. It did start to come in as the end. We tried TV. TV was, I found, too cumbersome. Radio was very dynamic. We could change things really quickly. TV took forever to do an ad. Then it played, and you couldn't change anything. And if they got the timing wrong, you couldn't change the timing. It was radio we loved because it was dynamic, and that suited us. And we did a lot of live shots. We developed a radio slot Friday mornings. It was it used to be What's On in Port Augusta, and we'd do it live. So we would not only talk about our business, but part of it was not focusing on us. We made us the byproduct, and we made the What's On in Port Augusta the main product. But it just became us. But it was us without trying to ram us down people's throats.
Yeah, which is important.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say it's an important definition there, because if you just talk about yourself, nobody really cares, right? But when they feel like they're part of that conversation, when it feels like it's more about them, then they're involved, they're engaged. Storytelling is really about the engagement, right? So keeping somebody's attention is difficult. And particularly if you just sit there and talk about yourself, it starts to become blah, blah, blah in the background, I believe. What are your thoughts on?
Well, you're right, because what we did with this, and this is how it focused on others, was that we used to actually go out in the community on Friday mornings and give a hint on where we were, and people had to find us.
Right.
So it created a bit of a I don't know, what do you call it? Yeah, well, yeah, and not only that, but we went and involved a whole heap of other businesses. So we got products from other businesses and created this gift pack that they would get Friday mornings. So it created this whole buzz around the place of where are they going to be Friday. In fact, it got so popular we had to bar a few people because they would wait outside my house,
right,
and
follow
me around to get the goods. And I ended up having to bar a couple. I said, mate, that's it, you're gone. Don't turn up for a few months. And but that was the key. But other businesses, so we would promote other businesses in that segment, who had provided prizes. But it was always the Saltbush Surf What's On. And I think that was the same. We created a surfboat carnival, which became, I think it was about, I don't know, nearly $10,000 prize money in Port Augusta for surf boats. Bear in mind, we don't have any surf.
Yeah.
And that started because when I came back to Port Augusta, I went on the tourism committee, and I'd done dragon boat racing up in Broome. And I had this idea. I thought this would be perfect for Port Augusta. Sheltered waters, we could have a ball. Anyway, I contacted the other people on the committee thought it was a good idea. So I contacted the dragon boat racing mob in Adelaide, and they made it so difficult that yeah, we could do it, but everyone would have to wear life jackets and everyone would have to do this. And I'm going, this is just too hard. This is not the concept that I wanted, because in Broome it was pretty free spirited and it was just a heap of fun, and there was probably a bit of alcohol involved as well. And anyway, that wasn't the scene we were trying to set. And one of the guys, Albert, mentioned it. He said, "What about surf boats?" I said, I hadn't even really thought about surf boats. And my family has a history with West Beach Surf Lifesaving Club. My dad was one of the original tin shedders that started the club back in the day. So I hunted around and found a contact, and anyway, the Surf Lifesaving Club was really interested in doing a competition. So I went around town and got a really good sponsor, Seagram's Financial Services up there, and mate, they put in thousands in prize money into that event, and we promoted the crap out of it. Same thing, made it not so much about Saltbush, but it was the club, because we were doing it. It became the Seagram's Outback Surfboat Carnival, but everybody knew Saltbush organised it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the key. We had some cracker times with that. We brought up, I don't know how many teams from Adelaide, and we used to have fun events, fancy dress events, and all the locals. Anyway, one of the clubs gave us a surf boat. So my job, of course, I've had lots of experience in surf boating, so I actually trained everybody. So I would go down after work to the old boat ramp at 4 o'clock with this old surf boat they gave us, and I'd take everyone out, giving them coaching lessons. So I guess I had to learn it pretty quick. Coaching lessons on how to drive this surf boat. So on the day, all the clubs would lend the local teams. So they would sort of adopt a local team, and they would then race in their surf boats. And we would get a couple of thousand people down on the beach on a day.
Nice.
It was unreal. Yeah. So, but once again, it was about marketing. It was probably about trying to make, I don't know, we did it by association.
Yeah. Yeah. If you were to still be in business, so roll forward, you got out when, 2019-ish?
2019, yeah.
2019. There's been a fair bit of flux and change between then and now, particularly in this sort of space. Would you, I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, but do you think you would do things differently? Do you would try different mediums? Do you think the old mediums still have a place? What do you think?
Look, I think the old mediums have still got a place, but I think social media now is just such an entrenched part of people's lives.
Mm.
Like I think it would have had to become a bigger part of the business. Like I think the human aspect. Like God, there's that many things I've almost forgotten about the business. Like we at one stage we put a bike shop in a mezzanine. We built a mezzanine floor. We had a very tall building, so we built a mezzanine floor and we put a bike shop in there. Back in the day when BMX was hot, really, once again, to associate ourselves with that young, youthful, outgoing. We didn't have surf, so we tried to have all the other youthful activities, and we used to run BMX competitions. And the council would come along and build. I can't even imagine the risk these days. Like we'd have young kids doing backflips on mounds of dirt that the council had built. And I'm thinking the liability risks are just horrendous now.
Yeah.
But back then it was nothing. And we'd have hundreds of people come down to watch all these little kids doing backflips over dirt jumps.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But once again, it was just associate our name with an event. So I don't think the human side of things changes. So I think there's always scope to do that. We started a 4-wheel drive show and shine. In the later years, I had my 4-wheel drive interest came back to the fore, and we used to have a show and shine event. We got the council to shut the street off. We'd have heaps of cars from all over the region come, and people walk around. We gave away that many prizes. In fact, I think there was a couple of events. We had that many prizes that everyone that entered got a prize.
Mm.
It wasn't just best and most, people's favourite and all of that. We had that much stuff to give away. Everyone got stuff. But it was just, and that was the key. It was always just about not trying to spruik ourselves,
Mm,
but being top of mind, you know?
right.
Back to your question, I'm not sure I would enjoy the social media side of it, so much. And even when we left, I would delegate a lot of stuff to the younger crew, and I would bring them in and go, "What do we do here? What should we do here? How do we word this? How do what should we do with this? How can we make a competition?" And look, and the marketing has evolved a lot with the new owner being a younger girl to involve a lot more social media.
Mm. So you got out in 2019. Was that retirement for you at that point?
Look, look, I had a fantastic young girl work for me. She started working when she was 14, young Demi. And look, she was always a bloody pleasure to work with, was as smart as a whip and a good work ethic. And look, she went off for couple of years break when she thought she wanted to be a hairdresser. And then she worked out that she didn't and then wanted to come back. And it was at that stage I thought, right, well, we need to start looking at a plan. And we had a plan of succession, basically. And we created this quite a few years out. And it was like, we sat down and had some hard talk and said, listen, you're smart enough to run this business. Do you want to? And so it became, there was a solid yes after we'd ascertained enough. And then that was the next, oh God, was it 2 years or maybe longer? That it was then basically I had her serving an apprenticeship to run the business.
Mm,
And I would take her to the ISRA meetings so that she would see all the other retailers. And a lot of them took staff as well, so that she could meet those people and see how an A grade business was run
yeah.
and go, well, that's the level we've got to aspire to. So I spent a lot of money on training her. We just evolved the process, and I just involved her more and more in the selling. And we talked about the and look, what night, and she was 19. So what 19-year-olds have got money to buy a business? So I had to vendor finance her and be confident that I was going to lend her the money and actually get it back.
Yeah.
And so it was in my interest to make her to get her in the best possible stead I could to do that. And even part of that, we went to solicitors together to get the contracts drawn up. And I remember buying trips to Adelaide where we'd sit in the car and we read that contract word for word out loud 3 times
Hmm.
because it was going to be no way that there would be any misunderstanding,
Yeah.
anything. And we went into it straight away. And I said to Demi, I said, mate, the only way this is going to work if this is a win-win. If you feel like you've won and I feel like I've won, well, then we've got a deal. So it has to be win-win. So we approached everything totally open, and with that, I guess, with that mantra that there was going to be a win-win, and it worked. And I think she's going to make her final payments on that business come Christmas time.
Right. Right.
And her husband has gone into work in that business, and they've created, and then once again they've just taken it on and kept it a good solid local business,
Nice.
well stocked, well run, and basically, she had the tools to do it all.
Fabulous. That's an unusual exit, I must imagine. But congratulations on making that work.
Yeah, look, I loved the business. I would have been happy to keep working, but the other thing was, I was dealing with a young woman who was also looking to get married, and then somewhere in that future was going to have some kids, which she has. She's got 2 young kids now, and it was like, well, either we work the exit plan out now, where she's single, no kids, has the ability to focus 100% on the business, and for at least for a couple of years, and that was her goal before she started thinking about a family, or I keep hanging on, and all of a sudden it becomes she's not in a position or not even motivated anymore because she's got other focuses.
Yeah.
So it was like looking at what was the same thing. What was a win-win for both of us? Hey, I got to retire and sell a business. She got to get into a business and become a business owner at 19. And, it was just, or was she 19? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But that was the process. And I guess part of that was the storytelling because, I wouldn't let it happen unless every detail of the process had been gone over and understood by the both of us, so that we both understood the story. So there was no come back and say, "Oh, you didn't tell me this would happen," or "You didn't tell me that." Like, that's why we both read the contract out loud. One would drive and one would read the contract and
Yep.
go, "Okay, you understand that clause? Yep. Well, this is what I think it means to me. What do you think it means to you? Yep. Okay. Cool on that. Next clause."
Nice.
And we did that 3 times.
Yeah, good job. So you retired, and clearly you had some passion for forward driving. It would be remiss of us not to talk about forward driving.
Well, yeah, I thought
So
that was the point of the story.
you've
But
got
anyway,
you've gotten into forward driving, but tell me, you've not only got into forward driving, but you're now a podcast host about forward driving. Tell me a bit about
well,
that journey.
yeah, I mean, I'd been into four-wheel driving for donkey's years. I had numerous four-wheel drives, but being towards the end of our business, where we would go away and leave staff in charge and Dem in charge more often, Elena and I would head off into the hills, being near the Flinders Ranges, and it sort of reignited our passion. Because remember, we went travelling back in the days when no one went travelling, and there were no mobile phones to take photos, and it reignited that in us. So I started just exploring the Flinders every chance I got, and four wheel driving. Started buying and building up different cars. And then as we came to look like retiring, I said, "Well, I'm going to get serious about this." So out of the blue, I sort of bought a caravan, and I needed a different vehicle to tow it. So I bought another four wheel drive and built that up with all the mods that I thought was required, and went off and did and just started doing all of these four wheel drive trips. Not that many with the caravan, but all over the countryside. And I started getting I guess, a feel for a base, or a feel of competence with that. And when I left the business, I said, "Well, I'm a bit bored in Port Augusta. What do I do?" And I had been listening to this guy with a podcast, and I thought, well, he sounds like he was a beginner with this. So I thought, well, let me look into it. And through the business, I'd set up web pages and all of this sort of stuff. So I had some degree of technical knowledge, and I just looked into it and went, okay. I sort of taught myself and set it up with Buzzsprout, and then I went out and I said, okay, what do I need? And at the time, I went and bought a Zoom 3 little box that I could do interviews with and record it and then transfer that to the computer. So I just started going off interviewing people, a bit like you, and it morphed and morphed into it would also be about interviews, but then it would be about some of the stuff that I would do. And lo and behold, all of a sudden it's 70 episodes later and 50,000 downloads. And I go, how did that happen?
Mm.
And I haven't been real conscientious because, I don't do it for money. It's a
Yep.
hobby.
Yep.
I don't seek sponsorship. I don't do it for sponsorship. A couple of people after I've done stuff with them, they've flicked me some stuff to say thanks, but I don't do it for that. And so anything I review it's a genuine review. I've bought it with my own money, and it's like, yeah, that's how I've found it. And it's really weird because you do this stuff, and I think this is the part of storytelling, because I've had to really come to grips with this, Jules, because I started off and I would try to be really polished and edit everything out and do whatever. And I thought, you know what, this is killing me, because I really love doing the podcast,
Mm.
talking to people, or even me telling a story. I really like that. But the editing is what drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Sitting back down and then spending another hour or two reliving it all. I'm going, oh, it does my head in.
I hear you.
And so I've had to and as time's gone on, my podcasts have probably gotten rougher and rougher. And I tell people to go, listen, this is how it is. If you like it, stick with it. If you don't listen, because I'm not going to edit every and ah out. I've got this shingles thing in my throat and I cough and I can't help it. I'm not going to edit every cough out. What you're going to get is me.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to listen to. And the weirdest thing, I've been traveling around the country and I've pulled up in the most remote location, and all of a sudden I hear a voice go, "Is that you, Andy?" I go, "What?" And they go, "Oh, I saw your car," because I got the Four Wheel Drive Tribe podcast on the back canopy,
Yep.
And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, mate, I've been listening to your podcast," and so I'm going, "Oh, this is just too weird."
Fabulous.
And it's like, and so there are a core of people out there I've had to come to accept, because I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty common everywhere that you get an imposter syndrome.
Oh, for sure.
You do whatever and you think, "Oh, I'm no good at this. I'm no whatever." But and I'm sure to some people my podcast is shit, and I accept that, and that's fine. I'd never, in any way, shape, or form, um, espouse to appeal to everybody.
Mm.
So it's as simple as that. But what I've found is that there is a core of people, and that really like it, and
Yep.
that blows me away.
I think your naming is kind of perfect because the tribe aspect to me is what makes storytelling the most interesting. I think if you try and be all things to all people, you will never succeed, right? Because it would just be average and it won't sort of relate to anybody in particular. But if you can be yourself and you can bring out those, elements of you that make you relatable, that make you interesting, you'll find that tribe of people. And it doesn't have to be tens of thousands of people. It could be a few hundred, it could be 10 people, it could be 10,000. It doesn't really matter. But there will be a percentage of people that like you. And if they like you, then they're going to follow you, they're going to listen to you, they're going to listen to your reviews, etc. And I think that's the important part about storytelling. It's not about trying to please everybody. But if you can intertwine, if you can get that intersection between doing what you love, doing it as you, as authentically as you, and then finding people who like that, I think you're on a winner.
I think that's the key. Is And that's what I've learned. And look, it's been hard because I started probably the storytelling on the podcast from trying to be what I thought a podcast presenter should be, and is and I guess I've morphed into being, you know what, I'm just going to be me.
Yep.
That's it. And if you don't like it, don't listen.
It's too hard to be somebody else.
And
That's the
you
other
know,
thing. It's too hard to be somebody you're not.
like on the podcast host now, you can actually you can send a message, and I've had people send me messages on the podcast, and like here's one from this year, and I've got to say this year I've been slack earlier on in the year. I haven't done many podcasts. He says, "Hi Andy, just checking you're okay. I've been hanging all year for your 2025 podcast. Haven't seen any updates anywhere, so I thought I'd check in with you to see if you're okay."
Oh, how good is that?
Like I'm just blown away.
Yeah.
So and that was always my intention when I named it the Four Wheel Drive Tribe. And a few people said, "Oh, I don't like the tribe bit," and I'm going, "No, that's the bit I do like, because that's the people I want to talk to that think they're in the Four Wheel Drive Tribe. That's their thing." And I think that's how it's working out.
I think it's fabulous. I was listening to one of your podcasts. I think it was the Simpson Desert. It was the Simpson Desert podcast, and there was this little story in there about you at a bar and having a little coughing fit. Do you want to tell that story? Do you remember that story?
Well, there's way more to that now, Jules. That's actually gone on. I was sitting in Maree. Look it up on a map, Maree. It's up on the start of the Birdsville track and the Unadada track. So I'm sitting at the pub and I'm waiting for my mate who runs a plane business there, and he's had to fly to Adelaide. So I've just had dinner with his wife and we're talking, and she's gone home, and I'm just sitting in the bar and we're watching State of Origin. And there's a bloke in front of me at the bar, and I was barracking for the Blues and he was barracking for the Maroons, and we were taking the piss out of each other a bit. Anyway, he went outside for a while, came back in, then he sat next to me and we started talking four-wheel drive stuff and just asked where I'd been. And I'd actually just done a solo adventure out from Brisbane out through the Simpson Desert and on the way back. So I spent a couple of weeks on my own just tooling around. Anyway, and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm going to the Canning Stock route." I said, I did the Canning Stock route last year. La, la, la. Anyway, we're talking and my throat started playing up and I started coughing. And he said, "Oh, you wouldn't be Andy, would you?" I said, "What?" He said, "You wouldn't be Andy from the Four Wheel Drive Tribe, would you?" I said, yeah. He said, oh, I knew it as soon as you coughed. so, so sometimes your crap editing can actually pay off. And we ended up talking and whatever. So he was there with a couple of mates down from Melbourne, and they had these tricked up cars and were going off into the Canning stock route. And I had a great night with those guys. And I had to say, I said that was probably one of the parts of sponsorship because he bought me a couple of beers. So I said, well, that episode could be sponsored by Blair. But the funny thing is that I kept in touch with Blair. And he had some adventures on the stock route. And I've actually got a podcast that I'm waiting to edit. I've sat down and talked to him for over an hour about his adventures on it. So he's gone from being a listener to now he's on the podcast.
There you go.
So I've got to load that one up next, part of the editing, my editing problem. But yeah, so it's become one of the things. And I think that's the other thing too, is that it's led that I've met some, because of the podcast, I've gone on to meet some, really cool people in the four-wheel drive tribe. And it's exposed me to that. So I've met different tag along operators that have become, really close acquaintances or even friends, and different people because of those things I've gone on and episodes I've done. It's led me to more people that I've met within my tribe. So it's given me the interest, which is why I sort of do the podcast. I think it'd be different if you were trying to do it for money. And I look at those guys, and some people have said, oh, are you going to do YouTube? I'm going, not in a million years. Like, not because I'm not that photogenic, but also because I just wouldn't want to put the time in. And I don't want to go and find a sponsor, and I don't want to be responsible. Like, I've been in business and that all my life. I've had to be responsible to people. All of a sudden, I'm retired and irresponsible.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying that. And so I don't want to be beholden to anyone to go that I have to get an episode out or I have to mention them 3 times or, whatever. If you get a mention in my podcast and I praise it, it's because it's good,
On your terms.
Yeah. I think that's it, and that's, I don't know. I mean, if you're in business and you've got the luxury of being able to do that, well, I think that's, you've won the storytelling game.
Yeah. Where do you think your podcast is heading, or do you want it to head anywhere, or do you just want to do it while it's still fun?
Mate, I'd like to do it more and more when I'm still, it's funny, like I started it in Port Augusta because it's a country town. I was retired. I was sitting around for a few years and I'm going, there wasn't a lot to do. So it sort of gave me an interest and an outlet like that. The funny thing is we've since moved over to Scarborough in Queensland, which is a seaside suburb in Brisbane. And, God, life is so full over here. It's actually finding time to fit stuff in. So that's sort of been the thing. And I go through phases where I'm going, oh, I'm really struggling with this. And then every now and again I'll meet someone and they'll just spark me off, or I'll get a message out of the blue. And it'll just spark me off to go, well, actually, it's not about me either anymore. Like, there are people that actually like this. Like, I think, when's your next episode coming out? When's your next episode coming out? So I sort of feel maybe I am obligated, obligated to the listeners rather, they're my sponsors, if you like. And however few there are, I got to respect the fact that they like it.
Andy, I've really enjoyed our conversation. This has actually been the longest podcast I've done. So congratulations. So you've managed to tip that boat or tick that box. But I have one final question for you, if you don't mind. What do you think, if you had to summarize, what do you think storytelling has done for you in your life over your, both personally, but as a business and even into retirement? What do you think it's done for you? And for those people that are sort of sitting back going, I probably need to do more of it. I'm a bit shy or a bit held back or a bit reserved, and maybe I don't leverage my voice enough. What would you say to them as a sort of final parting gift?
Well, you probably wouldn't think it, but I'm a real introvert. Like I'm the guy that sits in the group really quiet usually. So I've just found that telling a story has probably taken me out of my comfort zone. I was that kid. My grandparents read me stories. My mum was a really good storyteller. I loved English classes, the class where the teacher would say, right, I want you to relax, put your head on the desk. I'm going to read you out an excerpt out of a book. I would just drift away. So I guess I was always inclined that way. I just loved a story because it made your imagination work. And that's why I think books and stuff are so good, because they make your imagination work, and it's like a muscle. The more your imagination can work, well, then the more that can be possible. The more you can think might be possible, because it's possible in people's imagination. I think, I don't know, telling stories is just, well, I don't know. It's just been a part of how I've tried to approach things, because I think telling stories give you the human connection. And I think that's what I don't know. I don't know if despise is the right word, is about where we're heading as a species with with media and social media and heads down in phones and stuff. It seems to be, it's almost the opposite of that human connection through storytelling. So and I think, if you're in business and you're sitting around going, how do I do this? It's 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 like a muscle. There are people that teach storytelling. I mean, enroll in a course, learn it, learn how to tell a story. But I think your clients will relate a lot more to you through a story, um, than a pitch or I don't know, or any good pitch has to involve a story, I think.
Andy, thank you so much for your time. You've been incredibly generous. Where can the listener find out a little bit more about you and maybe plug into your podcast as well?
Look, if you want to hear what a really rough podcast sounds like, and not one like Jules, you got the 4WD Tribe, 4WD Tribe, so Four Wheel Drive Tribe podcast. That's what it's called. It's on Apple and Spotify and a bunch of other players and stuff like that. So all the same place as Jules is. So you can jump on and have a listen. And look, they are wide and varied, the topics. And I think that it's just, yeah, so there's something there. If you're into four-wheel driving, give it a ride.
Nice. Thank you, mate. Appreciate your time.
And you too. Thanks, Jules.
Andy embodies the term storyteller, doesn't he? He loves to tell a good old yarn. But the thing that struck me the most was he's willing to give it a go, give it a crack. And I think we could all learn from that. Much love. Chat soon.